Have you ever just dreamed of living on the water? You know, a life with all the freedom, all the incredible views, but without having to deal with the usual stuff, like cramped spaces and constant upkeep? Well, today, we are diving into a concept that tries to make that dream a reality. It's called the Green Living Vessel. Let's get right into it.
So this entire project really boils down to one huge question. Is it possible to solve the biggest headaches of living on the water, the insane cost, the lack of space, the complexity of it all, with just a single, really radical change in how you design it? Stick with me because the answer could totally reshape how we think about a life on the water. All right, so to really get why this idea is such a game changer, we first have to talk about the problem it's trying to solve. And that's the huge gap between the dream of living on a boat and, well, the often tough reality.
And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the typical boat life. It's incredibly expensive for the size you get, it's famously cramped, it's a constant maintenance headache, and it almost always runs on fossil fuels. But then, on the other side, you have the promise of the green living vessel. All the comforts of a real home, completely off-grid with a zero carbon footprint. I mean, that is a very bold claim.
So what's the single biggest barrier? It really comes down to this simple but kind of brutal reality of boat building. The cost just explodes with every extra foot. It's not like a house, right? With a boat, adding a little more length doesn't just add a little more to the price, it adds way more. Let's actually look at what that means in real dollars.
So to get a handle on this cost problem, let's start small. For a pretty well-equipped 20-foot boat, you could easily be looking at around $150,000. And that's a serious chunk of change for what is, let's be honest, a tiny space. Okay, but what if you want more room? Something that feels more like a small home? Well, let's jump up to a 50-foot vessel. The length has only gone up by 2.5 times, but the price? Whoa! It can skyrocket to $5 million or even more. That's not a straight line, folks. That is a massive, massive leap. And to really see this curve in action, let's just double the length one more time to a 100-foot yacht. Now we are talking about price tags that can easily blow past $50 million. This is it. This is the math that shows you exactly why a comfortable, spacious life on the water is just a fantasy for almost everyone using traditional boat designs. So how in the world do you break that insane cost curve? Well, you don't just tweak the design. You have to completely throw out the rulebook and rethink its basic shape. And that is the absolute core innovation of the Green Living Vessel.
So here's the big idea, the secret sauce. Instead of those sleek, complex, curved hulls, which are super expensive to build and create all those awkward, cramped spaces inside, the GLV basically says, forget that, let's build a house that floats. It uses a square, house-style design. And that one simple change lets you use standard building methods, it maximizes every single square foot of space, and it brings the cost way, way down.
And you know, this new shape leads to some mind-blowing numbers. The GLV is a staggering 38 feet wide. Now, to put that into perspective, that is wider than a lot of super yachts that are over 120 feet long. This incredible width doesn't just create gigantic living areas inside and out, it also gives it this amazing stability. It pretty much gets rid of that rolling motion you feel on most boats.
Now, a design this radical, it changes everything, right down to the materials you use. For most smaller boats, say up to 80 feet or so, fiberglass is king. It's cheap to pop them out of a mold, but for a huge, one-of-a-kind vessel like the GLV, creating a giant fiberglass mold would cost a fortune. As you can see here, once you get to this size, metal is really the only way to go. The GLV is built from aluminum, which gives it all the strength it needs without the impossible weight or cost of a fiberglass equivalent.
Okay, so this radical new shape solves the space problem and the cost problem. Awesome. But what about the other half of the promise? Living completely off-grid. Well, for that, the GLV basically becomes its own floating, self-contained energy island.
The system itself is huge, but the idea behind it is beautifully simple. First, the sun blasts down on this massive solar array on the roof. Second, a bank of inverters converts that DC power into the normal AC power we all use. Third, any extra energy gets stored in a big battery bank, for nighttime or cloudy days. And finally, that stored electricity powers absolutely everything on board. Simple as that. And when I say this system is massive, I really mean it. We are not just talking about a few panels here. This is a full-on 108-panel solar farm on the roof, kicking out about 43 kilowatts of power. That's managed by 14 different inverters and stored in a huge battery bank using modern, safe LFP or lithium ferrous phosphate technology. This isn't just a little backup system. It's designed from the ground up to be the only power source this home ever needs.
And this system has so much power to spare. On a normal day, the whole place uses about 60 kilowatt hours of electricity. But check this out. Even with a full house of guests, pushing the power usage up to 120 kilowatt hours a day, which is way more than most of us use in our homes on land, the system just handles it. No problem.
But here's the real clincher. What happens when it gets cloudy for a few days? Well, that's where the resilience comes in. The battery bank is big enough to run the entire vessel for about 3 full days with very little or no sun at all. And then the next time the sun comes out, that giant solar array can usually recharge the whole system in a single day.
So we've got the space and we've got the power. And when you put those two revolutionary ideas together, what do you get? You get the ultimate prize, a life on the water that feels exactly like living in a modern home with zero compromises.
Just look at the difference here. You can forget about the typical boat-style life. You know, the tiny little portholes, the cramped rooms, and those specialized complex fixtures that are a nightmare to fix? The GLV is all about house-style living. We're talking large, standard windows that just flood the rooms with light, wide open spaces, and normal, everyday appliances and plumbing that anyone knows how to use and service.
And the list of things you don't have to compromise on just keeps going. You can use your normal furniture, not expensive custom-built stuff. There are actual spacious closets and a real dedicated pantry. The walls and the roof have super thick insulation to keep it efficient. And it's not just about power. This thing makes its own fresh water and manages its own waste, so it can stay in beautiful remote spots basically forever.
Okay, so all of this sounds incredible on paper, right? It's a fantastic idea. But does it actually work in the real world? Well, the creators have been living on it and testing it for months, and the results are finally in.
You know, this quote from the creator, it really says everything you need to know. This boat has been self-sufficient every day for months. No generator backup or anything has been required. That's it. That is the ultimate proof that the design, the engineering, all the calculations, they were right. The system works exactly as they planned.
And listen, they didn't just test this on quiet, easy days. The vessel has provided 100% of its own power, day in and day out, even when it was under heavy load with 6 or 8 people on board. It has been thoroughly stress-tested in the real world, and it passed with flying colors.
So in the end, the Green Living Vessel is so much more than just an amazing boat. It's a powerful proof of concept that goes way beyond just living on the water. And it really makes you wonder, right? If you can build a comfortable, spacious, and completely self-sufficient home that floats, what does that mean for the future of sustainable, off-grid living absolutely everywhere, on land and on the sea?